Welcome, everyone. You're getting into the room for our flipped panel, or the panel of non-panelists, because nobody likes panels, and that's how we designed this today. Thank you so much for being here. We've got 4 amazing guests. I'm going to go off screen in just a second to let them hold the stage, but just wanted to remind everyone that this session is designed for you to ask as many questions as you want to ask out of the gate. We won't be doing any sort of speechifying and then waiting until the last 5 minutes for, a few Q's and not that many A's. So if you've got a question for the panel, we'd encourage you to just go ahead and put it into the chat right now. I'm going to go off screen. I'm going to moderate that chat. And with that, I'm actually just going to turn it right over to our host with the most and fellow panelist, Mr. Too Tall, Chris Pirie.
Good. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Learnerpalooza. It's great to see you all. And although I can't actually see you, but I just trust you're all out there. I'm Chris Pirie. I'm the ex-learning leader at Microsoft Field Organization and at Oracle and a few other Bay Area companies. I'm a private investigator into the future of learning at work. I'm the CEO of a consulting group called LFG. I'm a podcast host of Learning is the New Working, and I'm a massive fan of Learnerpalooza and the energy, the local energy and the grassroots energy that you guys can put together every year and sometimes in between. Erin and Darren, yay to them, who are so busy this morning making this the best it can possibly be. Thanks for all their work. Asked me to host the opening panel and said, we've got this amazing set of speakers, Chris. You are going to love these people. And they're going to come in and can you do your stuff? And so, my stuff is I reach out to people. We have a pre-meeting. I try and understand, their area of expertise. I craft some erudite, piercing questions and line them all up. And then we kind of agree on the script and then we put on the show. We had a fantastic conversation with these people. They are absolutely Learnerpalooza ready people. And at the end of the sort of first 15 minutes of our discussion, we all violently agreed that we absolutely hate panel discussions, right? And you're going to get some reasons why we hate panel discussions, but we decided we'd do an anti-panel discussion or an panel discussion. And we tried to think of as many ways as possible to sort of like mix up the whole panel discussion experience. And at the end of the day, it's all about you, the audience. So if this is fun and we hit our goals, because we've got some goals here, it's really going to be kind of up to you guys. We need you to start thinking about questions for this amazing set of people that we get to talk to for the next hour. Let me see. We're going to find out a little bit more about them in 1 second, but in the spirit of Learnerpalooza, I just want to check how many people we've got online. Can anybody give me that information? I don't want to start before everyone's on. Looks like
yep, you can see that 150 plus.
Okay. So before we have fun, well, one thing that we're going to do is we're going to try and do the world's fastest panel discussion. It's going to be 30 questions as provided by you, the audience. So start thinking in 30 minutes. And Erin's going to keep us honest with her Zen timer. Do you want to try it out?
Not ready yet, but
not ready yet.
You'll know it when you hear it.
In the meantime, let's meet our amazing panelists. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves? I'm going to go stage right to left for me and start with you, Janice. And I've got 3 questions for you for each of the panelists. I'm going to say them just once, so pay attention. I want to know where you are in the world. I want to know what your day job is or what you consider your day job. I want you to say why you are interested in the topic of learning and development at work. And then I want to know 1 or 2 reasons why you hate being on panel discussions. Janice, can you go?
Okay, Chris, that was 4 and not 3. So I'm going to respond to Great. I'm Janice Burns, and I am the Chief Career Experience Officer at Degreed. I love learning because I'm passionate about democratizing access to education, whether it's for employees or for non-employed individuals, and helping people design their own careers. I am currently in Norwalk, Connecticut, and the reason I hate panels is that they seem very artificial and too scripted.
No danger of that happening here.
No.
Great. Well, thank you. It's great to meet you. Thanks for coming to Seattle all the way from Norfolk or Norwalk?
Norwalk.
Norwalk. I've never been there. Connecticut, though. I've been to Connecticut, beautiful part of the world. Let's go to, let me see. Let's go to Michael next.
Hey, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Arist. We're a text message learning platform used by organizations like DuPont, the state of California, and the Poynter Institute to rapidly train remote workers and frontline employees. The reason I'm sort of obsessed with L&D, even though I'm 21, so I've never actually been the recipient of L&D. I've never worked for a company, unfortunately, is because both my parents are refugees, and so growing up, I realized the power and importance of education very, very early on. And what I love about L&D is that L&D makes education accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford to go to school or university. So that's why I care so deeply about it. And and then in terms of why I hate panels, I think that they're just often not very authentic and don't really get to the core issues that people have questions about. And I'm calling in from beautiful Portland, Oregon, which today has the world's worst weather or the world's worst air pollution. So thanks so much for having me.
I thought you might have your N95 on this morning, Michael. Let's go to the next panelist, which is Rodney.
Hey, good morning, y'all. I am Rodney Evans. I am a partner at a company called The Ready, where we do org design and transformation with a real bent around the future of work, creating adaptivity and humanity in large, complex, and often traditionally bureaucratic systems. I am in the Berkshires in Western Massachusetts today at my in-laws, though I am normally in Durham, North Carolina. And I'm very interested in the topic of learning. A lot of the work that I do in disrupting large organizations is very much about creating a mindset of learning even over knowing, and really invoking curiosity in leaders who have lost it through lots of success and lots of experience and lots of calcification in their time. And why I hate panels, God, it's a great question. So many things about panels that I hate. I commonly refer to the ice cream scoop in panels, which is like, I say a thing and then Michael makes another ice cream scoop and then Janice makes another ice cream scoop. And all of you are like, I really wish that they would just shut up and move on to my question now. So we're going to try not to do the ice cream scoop today. We're going to try to keep it real snappy for you.
Awesome. I'm looking at the time, we're 10 minutes in. I am the time manager, and that's the worst thing in the world because I can't really do it. So we'll see how that goes. Thank you, all of us, for joining the panel. I think I've covered everybody, right? Erin, just checking.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're now going to we're just going to prepare to go into this kind of reverse panel discussion. Instead of me asking erudite, fancy pants questions, we're going to see what you guys want to know from this amazing set of people that we have. And I just jotted down some possible topics that you might want to think about based on people's area of expertise and passion. We've got org design, we've got future of work, we've got democratizing opportunities through learning. We've got life as first generation immigrant of refugee parents. We've got, amazingly, this Learnapalooza is such a physical Seattle thing. Typically, we've got people from across the United States in this panel. So that's one of the sort of the benefits of moving to a virtual model this year is we get really interesting people from outside our typical sort of geographical domain. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Now we're going to go into this massive experiment. Are you ready, Erin?
I am indeed. Are you all ready?
Everybody going to set their watches. Like the next 30 minutes are going to be either chaos or amazing or some combination thereof.
It wouldn't be Learnapalooza without that, frankly.
The panel is going to signal their interest in a particular question by sort of putting up their hand or some sort of object. And I will try and facilitate that, but I'm also going to answer some questions myself. And Erin's going to be our sort of moderator. So everybody ready?
Ready.
Looks like the audience is well ready. There's a bunch of questions already, so let's go.
Yeah, one of the top questions was, which orgs are doing learning right? Why would you choose them as good examples? And tell us what you think we should be emulating from them.
So I'll answer. Because I work at Degreed, which is an upskilling SaaS-based platform company, I get to talk to a lot of different companies and CLOs about their learning strategies. So I could name a couple, but the one that's standing out for me right now is Ericsson. And that is because they really are progressive in how they try to integrate learning into work and look at skills as a means of preparing people for the future. They're in the middle of a transformation where they'll be looking at their culture systems and business systems and their infrastructure, but their thinking is so progressive that they impress me.
Good stuff.
Fantastic. And 4 seconds to go. So next question. You guys are talking about the future of work. Where would you point someone who is working on their own futurist skills?
Michael.
Yeah, so I would point people, towards the research, right? I think what I've noticed, and I think this isn't unique to L&D. This is a broader problem across business, is that there's research going back 10, 20 years, indicating innovations in L&D that still haven't been implemented in the workplace. Right, and oftentimes we can look to research and also simplifying things instead of making things more complex to creating really meaningful innovations in workplace learning and innovation. One example that we think about with our work is the first study about text message based learning and behavior change came out 20 years ago, and we're only now seeing organizations adopt it into the workplace. So that's my recommendation.
Awesome. So what is an essential or key mindset that you think L&D practitioners should be cultivating within themselves or within their learners? Rodney.
Hi. Look, I wouldn't actually bifurcate between learners, L&D pros, and the workforce. I think there are just some essential mindsets that we need to be grokking and living into at the moment. And some of those are things I mentioned in the opening, like curiosity, like lifelong learning, like systems thinking, like complexity theory. These are just things that are going to serve us really well right now. But one of the things I think is really key, and Janice touched on this in her answer, is I think we need to stop thinking about these activities as being separate. Like, we don't do our day jobs and then do learning over here and then do transformation over here and then do personal development over here. Like, we are one human in one or multiple systems. And the more that we can start to integrate the things that we need to learn with the new thing that's coming, with the gap that we're experiencing, with the content that we're ingesting, the better. So the mindset that I want us all to be living into is the curiosity to continually evolve and adapt, and the idea that that is actually an essential part of our work. It is not something to be done in an extracurricular manner.
Nailed it. All right, so you knew that we wouldn't get too many softballs from this crowd, so I'm going to give this one to all y'all. We've got a person who works in community health, and she says, losing this question, sorry. So it seems as a health practitioner that COVID has increased inequity in our work, e.g. essential workers are generally the lowest paid and without health or sick or pay benefits and probably access to learning, frankly. Are there actions we can take to mitigate this inequity? Chris P. wants to take it.
Okay, I think it's a brilliant observation. I've been thinking about it, as many people have for the last 6 months. I would phrase it slightly differently, and that is that this epidemic, this extraordinary situation we find ourselves in, has exposed a lot of the inequities, social, in the workplace, in the family even. And sort of exposed them and shone a bright light on some of the things about our society here in America and around the world that are not perhaps as they should be and as we want them to be. In terms of inequity around learning and workplace learning, one shining example is how essential workers, whether it's in the healthcare or frontline workers who are gig workers perhaps, we've realized how essential those jobs are, and we've also realized how little we invest in the people who do that work, especially in terms of protections like healthcare and training, for example. I'll give you one quick. I thought that was the time going off. I don't know how much time I've got left. One great conversation I had with the head of learning at Airbnb was they're actually not allowed to educate and train their frontline hosts because it would start to jeopardize the sort of contractual arrangement they have with those people. So there are some real fundamental legal frameworks that we've got to get right. The good news is, thanks to the kind of work that Janice talks about and does in terms of democratizing access to learning, there's an incredible set of resources that people can take action around, whether it's using Michael's platform or Degreed, or there was a 900% increase in the number of MOOCs consumed this year. People are sort of voting with their feet. They understand the value that Rodney talked about of becoming lifelong learners, and it's great to see that happen. But lots of work for us to do.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Now, that was a pretty dense question. Does anybody else want to answer it while not doing the ice cream scoop pile-on? It's up to you.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in super quickly because this is something that I'm like really obsessed with. You know, what I think COVID-19 has exhibited is that, you know, certain forms of digital learning, like video courses, for example, right, are in some cases fundamentally inaccessible to millions and millions of American workers, right? And I think, you know, COVID-19 has really forced us to understand what is the lowest common denominator of accessibility, and how can we make, you know, learning genuinely learner-centric, right? And really fully understanding both the time limitations that many learners have, right? Because if you are a single mom of 3, you often don't have time to watch a MOOC, or you often don't have time to take a video course or even go to an in-person lecture. So I think, you know, being really considerate of you know, the limitations that frontline workers have and trying to design learning around them is really critical.
Awesome. So next question. So from you all who think about the future of work, what do you see as the opportunities and the roles that don't exist today? Or are there roles that you think should exist in orgs to design them in a new way?
Go ahead, Janice. I might pile on.
Okay.
But you go for it.
Okay, thank you. I had an opportunity to actually participate in a study that was about the 21 jobs of the future for HR. And I created one, which was the employee enablement coach. And I think as we look into the future, we're going to need people in HR who can focus on how they enable employees to have durable careers by helping them understand the skills they have, how to cluster those skills so that they can use them for different types of work, and how to build new skills that they can pile on to keep their ability to work always current and for them to always be marketable. That it's not about learning, but it's really about enablement. And we have to help people in a coaching type of way understand how they can remain employable for as long as they want to work.
Nailed it. 13 seconds to go. Next question, or same question, over to Rodney.
Rodney wanted to answer.
Yeah, so one came to mind and one I just made up while Janice was talking. So one thing is I really do feel like org design, I'm slightly biased, but I do feel like org design is a really necessary skill, and not in the traditional management consulting, like we'll make you $1 million PowerPoint deck with a new org chart on it. I mean like adaptive, iterative, customer-centered org design. And, I talk to a lot of execs and they'll, a CEO will say to me like, I'm hiring a COO and I just need them to be really tight operationally. And I'm like, dude, if your new COO does not have dope future of work org design skills, you have missed the mark. And I think that is not just true of the C-suite. I think it's true of learning folks. I think it's true of HR folks. I think it's true of marketers. It's like, if we don't understand how to experiment and learn our way through emergent events in the world, we're fundamentally screwed. And the second job that I just made up is I think that most organizations should have like a field trip coordinator. And what I mean by that is there's just such a phenomenal amount of information in the world that we have access to. And I think it's quite difficult to curate when you're inside a system, just to know who to be looking at or who's getting it right. And more companies are realizing that like the world is not a zero-sum game, and they're pretty open and willing to talk about what they've tried and what's worked well for them. We just often don't know who to ask. And, large clients of mine ask me every single day, like, well, who should I be talking to think about learning or think about budgeting or think about hiring or think about whatever? So I think somebody, having the kind of role where you're just like looking at what's happening and helping to curate and organize that kind of learning from the outside would be really valuable.
I love that. And there's kind of a tag-on question. So specifically, who inspires you outside of our industry, and how else can we avoid an echo chamber? I think you partially answered that second one, but who inspires you outside of our industry? Where else should we be looking, field trip wise or otherwise?
I'll go. I love this idea of learning from others and setting up purposeful collisions and going on field trips. I mean, getting out of Redmond was my mantra when I ran a team at Microsoft, because it was so evident to me coming into this company that people were just looking within their own ecosystem for solutions and for talent and for people. And a lot of those problems had already been solved or disrupted and thought about in different ways elsewhere. So I love the field trip idea. Don't mean to pile on Rodney, but that's a huge one. Places that I would specifically go today is I'm really interested in what people in IT have done around moving solutions to agile, minimum viable products, really having a sort of engineering mindset of we set up an experiment, we try something, we read the signals and see the results, and then we iterate. I think learning people for the longest time have had this kind of waterfall approach that is not fast enough, it's not agile enough anymore. So I like talking to people in engineering and IT. I like talking to scientists in general, people who really have a scientific method, who operate from a position of curiosity, but also seek the truth in data. This is something that in L&D we've been very, very bad at doing. So hanging out with scientists, neuroscientists, computer scientists, even social scientists can be really, really productive for us. And then last but not least, creatives, people who make things for a living, people who they're typically very, very in touch with their audience, and they're very sort of audience centric. And so all kinds of creatives, people that I would want to hang out and go on field trips to, blow some glass.
Awesome. So Rodney let me know that I had not seen Michael wanted to answer a couple of questions. So Michael, I apologize for that. Look at me practicing inequity out of the gate. Do you want to do any go backs on anything?
Oh, no. I'm also, I think that the one just quick thing that I'll mention that based off of what Chris shared is that, one story that I love and one person that really inspires me outside of L&D is Tony Fadell, the creator of the iPod. So the iPod, Tony was hired by Apple in, I believe, in January, and the iPod was released in September, right? And when Tony was hired, the iPod was just an idea in his head. And I think, that's just an exceptional example of how organizations can move really, really quickly and experiment really, really quickly when innovation is critical, right?
Awesome. So next question comes from,
Janice.
oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm sorry, this is an ice cream scoop, but I think we all should pay attention to what's happening in multimedia. I think about the iPod, and it was my first inspiration for how learning should occur. That I wanted learning to be like a playlist that I had on my iPod, and that nothing should be longer than 3.5 minutes because no one has time for it. And I think as we look at things like Netflix and Masterclass, how people live is how people should be learning. And I think there's a lot that we can learn and take from multimedia and trends in multimedia to help inform us on how to better engage people in learning.
Awesome. You ready for another question, gang?
Yes.
Yeah.
This kind of dovetails, and maybe I can expand it. The question is actually, in all of your research, which organizations have cracked the nut on using virtual assistants to deliver, quote, first-time education at the point of need? But maybe you could also comment on AI and tech to deliver education at the point of need in general.
I'll go in there. I've done a little bit of research on AI. It's a big buzz, right? A lot of the vendors in our space will talk about their AI solutions. And I think most people have tracked along with the conversation.
Sorry, Chris, ignore that.
That was a short minute.
Yeah, ignore that.
I'm getting the message. No, there's been a lot of interesting conversations around the ethics of AI and how things shaping up. It seems like AI we'll be working with AI more and more and more in all kinds of jobs, in jobs that we hadn't imagined in the past. In terms of learning, I've seen some really, really interesting solutions. And I've seen really it's around prompts, like helping surface signals to you around things that are going on that you couldn't possibly grok, to use that word again. Because these AI systems can just look at tons and tons of data. So surfacing kind of relevant pieces of data, sort of being your eyes and ears amongst big data sets seems to be an important way to go. We are for the first time seeing people learn on these massive platforms. So I think there's something like 5 million active learners on the language platform Babbel. There are millions of active learners on edX. And we can now look at the behaviors of those learners at scale and start to identify patterns, which could hopefully help people be smarter learners. Think of a learning coach that could tell you when's the best time of day for you to do deep study, or when's the best time of day for you to reflect, or surface information about topics that you're interested in. So there's definitely a ton of exciting upside around this, but it's also very loaded, and the smart people are starting to think about the ethics of this, and are we just programming human existing biases into these big scale platforms, which could be dangerous. So they're the two interesting threads, I think, in AI.
Thanks, Chris. You are kind of bad at this timing thing. Do I need to get more strict? Okay. Does anyone else, I know that was a pretty dense question. Any other thoughts or comments? Just sort of the research on AI or delivering learning at the moment of need using virtual assistants. All right. Seeing none, we've got a simple question, but I think it's loaded. So can you provide an example of integrating learning into work?
can. So many. So this is what, this is a lot of my job all day. So it's really fun to actually think about how to answer this as a specific question rather than just doing it. But here's what I would say. When we're trying to do something differently at work, what that requires, inevitably is learning. We are learning something new if we are trying something different. And so what that might look like is, do we have a different kind of meeting practice? Do we have a different kind of panel facilitation? Do we have a different kind of decision-making process? Do we have a different kind of whatever? What can we do rather than getting out of the habit of taking a lot of time to plan what the new thing is going to be and what the steps are to get there? What can we do to actually inhabit the new practice and just try it and learn it together? And so what you're seeing right now is a really good example of that. We had as a group, this panel had one 30-minute call where we talked in principle about what we wanted to get out of this and in principle about what we didn't want this to be. And then we created a series of experiments in terms of what the rules would be, what the timing would be, how this would work. And now we are trying it. And we are all in the experience together with you of learning how this can go. And so that's what I mean. And this is a very specific example, but when I ask people, for example, in an organization to conduct a retrospective for the first time, and what I hear, or any variety of sort of future of work practices, and what I hear from people is well, what would the structure of that be? And what would the prompts be? And what technology would we use? And who would lead it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, you actually have the information that you need to participate in the practice. I just want you to show up and learn how to do it by actually doing it. So that's what I mean about integrating the learning and the doing. It's figure out what it is you want to learn. And then rather than spending a lot of time planning the learning, just get yourself into an embodied experiment of trying it.
I love that. Rodney and Rodney, Aaron Dignan and the Ready Associates always talk about just start by starting. And I've been thinking a lot about James Clear's motion versus action. I tend to be in my head and I need to do more of that. Just get in and embody it, but it's scary. So thank you for that answer. Anybody else you want to pile on? Janice, go.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think one of the pitfalls that L&D professionals fall into is believing that technology is the answer to learning in the flow of work. When we're learning in the flow of work every day, take advantage of projects, take advantage of conversations that you hear and jump in and ask a question about it. I learn every day, whether it's reading something new, reaching out to another employee and asking them to give me feedback or insight into something that I'm thinking, just jumping in on a project. I think we are all learning every day and we don't give ourselves credit for the learning that we're doing, and therefore we don't know how to apply it. But it is not about the technology. The technology can enhance the learning, but it's you yourself that has to do it, take advantage of the opportunities, and move from there.
Awesome.
I'd like to, if I could, just follow, I don't want to pile on, I want to give a different perspective on learning in the flow of work. I don't disagree I don't disagree with those points, but I do think that there's a sort of implied benefit of learning in the flow of work, that it doesn't cost time and energy, that it just sort of naturally happens while you're doing things. And I take great exception to that. If you can definitely get an assist, or you could get some coaching, or you could get a prompt from technology to do something differently or improve your performance in a micro way. But I think we often forget that to learn something is hard. It uses, to change your behavior or to learn a new concept takes time, it takes energy, and it takes space. And I like that Josh Bersin has a nice model where he says, there are some things that you can learn in real time, like performance enhancement type things. And there are some things where you've just got to take time out and you have to dedicate time and brain power and energy and space and deliberate practice to doing as well. And that might be the first time you become a manager or when you take a new job. And so I sometimes think learning in the flow of work has become shorthand for learning we can do that's low cost and low impact. And I worry about that.
Oh, you nailed it, Chris.
Well,
You ready for another one, gang?
Yes.
All right. So your next question is, in order to learn and adapt, we need organizations and teams that support psychological safety. How do you or we do that well and model it for model the vulnerability that is necessary as leaders? And I had to navigate away, so it looks like Janice is taking that.
Yeah, I think part of what you can do and what I've done as a leader is to not focus on performance as a retrospective or a backward-looking process, but to really focus on enablement and to give people success tips and encouragement as they move through a process, and as a leader, also give them cover when they make mistakes. Most of us learn the best when we've made a mistake and we've had to course correct. But in order to feel safe doing that, you need to know someone has your back and someone's going to give you cover. So as a leader, I think it's our job to put people in challenging situations, support them through it, give them success tips, but also give them cover when they make mistakes. And if you do that consistently, I think that your employees begin to trust you and feel safe experimenting with you. That's been my experience leading big teams. So that's what comes to mind for me.
I would just join. I totally agree, Janice. And there are a couple of things that I think are really requisite in terms of the psych safety that is required to learn. One is that leaders have to stay in the experience. It can't be like the team is learning and you are a part, leading or assessing or judging. Like, get in there and be a part of whatever it is that is going on. That's just a really easy way to model like vulnerability and also just like equality that I think is beneficial and really helpful. One really easy hack that I've started to do recently with clients is anytime they're going to do any kind of like update meeting, which like, God help us, but anytime there's going to be like an all hands or a town hall or an initiative update or a project status or whatever, I have asked them to start orienting away from what has happened and toward what have you learned or what insight have you gained, and just starting to normalize that like learning is data, insight is data, learning is learning. Everything doesn't have to be whether it was good or whether it was bad. Some things just like are, and some things just have happened, and it's more beneficial for us to collectively orient around insight than it is just around like progress or production. So those are just a couple of really easy hacks that I've found to be effective in starting to cultivate psych safety. But also, you know, I think sometimes in large organizations, learning can become a little bit of a like thing we have to do. And ideally it's something that is a little bit more fun. So taking a perspective of like, let's let this be messy. Let's let this be fun. Let's apply a little bit of play and silliness to this. And let's not expect ourselves to be good at it right out of the gate, because that's the whole point, is we're going to be here doing this together because we know we suck at it. And we just, you know, we're in the experience.
Awesome. So I know we're not piling on, but we got 3 out of the 4 on psych safety and our role as leaders. Michael, I just want to give you the chance to chime in there if you feel like that's one you want to take. Otherwise, I can move on.
No, I'm all set. Let's move on. Those were some incredible answers. So I'm down to move on.
Okay, great, thanks. And I haven't been tracking how many questions we're blazing through, but I think we're doing a good job. How to make unlearning a systemic psychological skill, or what is your take on this whole unlearning concept, full stop? And I don't see, sorry, who took that? Janice.
No, let Chris take it.
17 questions is my tracking, but somebody might be tracking better than me. I honestly don't know much about unlearning. I hear it used in the context of kind of mental agility, not being stuck in doing things the way that you've always done them because that's what your profession says or that's what your experience tells you. Whitney Johnson wrote an interesting book called Disrupt Yourself, which is really about how to sort of remap and reinvent yourself and disrupt your existing practices. That's kind of an interesting book. That's where I would point people to go a little bit deeper on that. But Janice might know more. So
Yeah, I actually participated in a research study a couple of years ago with Harvard School of Education. They have something called the Learning Innovation Lab, and they studied unlearning for an entire year at the individual, team, and organizational level. And one of the things that became very clear at the individual level is very difficult to unlearn because what you've learned over a period of time becomes your expertise, and your expertise becomes your identity. And to unlearn something makes you vulnerable in terms of what your identity is. So instead of thinking about unlearning, what you have to use almost change management principles of allowing yourself to keep the things that you already know that will be beneficial going forward with you, letting go of the things that no longer pertain, and then adding on some new skill or new insight. But if you try to completely forget what you know, it is too disruptive to the psyche, so it barely works. And that's why oftentimes when you want mass transformation, you will put someone in a role who has no experience in that role because they don't have to unlearn that role.
Awesome. So I am having a little trouble. Looks like our next question is, I think this gets us to 19, if not 20. What makes virtual meetings engaging for you? And now in this increasingly, well, we've got two questions. What makes virtual meetings engaging in your opinion?
Yeah, so I can take that one, Erin. And shameless plug for the podcast that I co-host. It's called Brave New Work. We did a whole series on the sort of pandemic and what it means for organizations, but we also had some really good guests like the CEO of GitLab come on and talk about, what being in a fully remote organization really means. I think in terms of remote meetings and remote connection, to me, there are a few principles. One is we don't want to try to simulate what is happening in the office. So what I think happened at the beginning of the pandemic when people were working remotely for the first time was we were like, we'll just do what we always do, but we'll do it on Zoom. And it's like, no, dude, that is not the move here. Like, we need to actually atomize our office experience and then put the component parts where they belong. So if there is a component part of our day that's about connection and socialization and love, let's figure out how to play a game together or drink a beer together or do whatever. If there's a part that's about conveying information, maybe we can now put that in a tool or in a place that it can be pulled and read so we don't have to stare into the screen for another hour of the day. If there's a part that's about actually learning together, how do we do that? Maybe with a video, a small screen video and we're in a collective board or other kind of tool together. So to me, what makes the virtual experience engaging is having the experience itself be fit for purpose rather than saying, this is what needs to get done. So we're just going to try to force it into the platform that we have. And the other thing is, and this is a really easy hack, but if you do something at the beginning of every meeting or learning session or workshop or whatever you're in that creates equal airtime, that creates a round, whether that's something like a check-in question or whether it's just any kind of, something that every single person answers, you're much more likely to create more shared airtime through the rest of the meeting. And that shared airtime is part of engagement because nobody wants to come to my meeting and listen to me talk for 50 out of 60 minutes. So I would just say, like, start your virtual interaction the way that you mean to finish them. Like, incept it the way that you want it to roll from there.
I love that. And not to fangirl too much, but I love Rodney and Aaron Dignan's podcast, Brave New Work. I learn something from it every time I listen. So please do go take her up on her shameless plug, because it's amazing. All right, you ready for another question, or anybody else on that last question? Okay, your next question is, as organization-wide remote work continues, the distance between headquarters and remote workers increases. How do we close that gap? Oh, Janice, brave soul, take it away.
Yeah, it's a good question that a lot of companies are trying to figure out, actually. I don't know if we have the answer. I spend time with a lot of CHROs, and this has come up in every single kind of workshop that we've had. It's difficult, especially now that everyone realizes that we'll probably never go back to work in the same way that we knew before COVID. One of the things that they have learned is that they have to teach their leaders to engage with their employees differently, to actually check in on their employees versus checking out whether or not they're performing. So checking in versus checking on. But it is a real challenge that I think will create some inequities, and we're going to have to spend a lot of time figuring that out. So that didn't answer the question. It just kind of gave your perspective.
Love it. So we're at 9:20 right now. Chris, just a quick check-in. Do you want to do that final round?
Let's keep going. I think we're at like 22 or 23 questions. I'm goal-oriented. I think we can get there.
Okay, sounds good. So looks like one of the next questions is, what's your sense of bias in L&D and how to account for it and mitigate it? Sorry, ignore that. How does bias currently exist? How can we mitigate or recognize it in L&D?
Michael.
Yeah. So one, again, I think in L&D, there's many different types of biases, right? One that I've noticed and one that I can speak to is, I think oftentimes in discussions about future of work or discussions about the future of learning, Gen Z isn't brought to the table, right? One thing that's been amazing about Learnapalooza, and one thing that I'm really grateful for, is that, Gen Z is brought to the table for the discussion about our future, right? And the future of how we're going to learn and how we're going to work. Fundamentally, even though the experts disagree about whether or not Gen Z learns or works differently, I think the reality is there are differences that need to be acknowledged, right? And ensuring that when we design learning experiences and when we design work experiences, we take those into account is really, really critical. Because I've noticed, both a number of learning providers and a number of companies create initiatives for Gen Z that if they had actually asked somebody from Gen Z, they would probably not have started in the first place. So I think one really, really good way to reduce that level of bias is just to bring people to the table, right? And genuinely listen and genuinely consider what are the needs of this individual, or what are the needs of this of this cohort of people, and how can we genuinely design learning and work experiences around them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like it goes back to our earlier questions and answers around inequity, the mindset. There's so much that feeds into that. Anybody else want to tackle that question? All right. So if you could give your opinion on this, what would you like to see changed in our industry? Sorry, ignore that. What would you like to see changed in our industry? L&D, HR, OD? Michael.
Yeah, sorry, not to do two back-to-back questions, but I think one of the things that that I would love to see, and I think this is already happening for a lot of really incredible organizations, but just more rapid experimentation, right? I think one of the things that was somewhat disheartening about COVID is that I think it exposed the fact that some organizations really can't move quickly and really can't experiment, and adapt to new tools as needed. And I think this is an even bigger problem in K through 12, right? We work with a number of school districts that come to us and they're like, that we have, for example, 10,000 students, right, who don't have access to the internet, and we'd love to use your product to reach those students on the internet. And we're like, great, yeah, let's run an experiment. Let's get moving. Let's and we try to fit everything within a week or 2 week timeline, and then we run into these sort of bureaucratic processes that end up pushing back adoption of solutions by 6 to 12 months, right? And the reality is learning is urgent, right? Learning is always urgent. And because learning is so urgent, the way that we deliver learning should also be urgent and should also be, rapidly experimented and hypothesized and stuff like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why in the United States, most school districts are really not in a position to serve their most vulnerable students and won't be for another 6 to 12 months because they just don't have the processes in place to rapidly experiment with new solutions.
Wow.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Can I jump on here?
Everyone wants to go on that one. Rodney.
Yeah. So the thing that I would like to see change about the whole sort of people space and category is fundamentally to assume good intent and not be oriented around the lowest common denominator or around compliance. I can't tell you how many times I'm in organizations where a leader of a large business unit has brought me there because they want to disrupt and they want to transform. They want to become more modern, more adaptive and human. And I've got like learning professionals and HR professionals that are like, well, what's the ROI on doing this thing? And like, what if someone takes advantage, or what if we open this channel and someone does something inappropriate? And I'm like, you know what, y'all, when we behave like prison wardens, people act like criminals. So like, let's just start, like, if I'm in your crappy bureaucratic old school organization where nothing gets done and I'm trying to disrupt it with the buy-in and partnership of a bunch of people who are fired up, like, don't be the people ops person that's like, I'm not sure. What if something goes wrong? Like, be the person who like has the spine, has the courage to say something could go wrong. And for what it's worth, a lot of things are going wrong right now. And like the zillion rules and policies that we have are not preventing them. So let's be a little bit smarter about risk and let's trust our brilliant colleagues to basically use good judgment.
Mic dropped.
Thanks, friends.
Chris, did you want to jump in on that? What do you want to see changed in our industry?
There is so much, and so much that has to change. And I think of two things. First of all, the world of work is changing just before our eyes. I mean, how you contract with somebody to exchange your labor or your expertise for a living is just blowing up right before our eyes. 40 million people unemployed, 1 in 5 Americans doing gig work. Companies are absolutely petrified. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to manage this transition. They're invested in real estate that nobody wants to use anymore. They are piled high with the kind of processes and systems that Rodney just talked about that crush the living daylights out of people. And this, we've seen it play out this summer on the streets of our cities and also in our home offices. Like, it is changing. And so how you think about learning at and for work is going to have to change quickly. If there's one thing that I like about what I'm seeing in the workplace learning, and that is the shift from this idea of teaching, where I tell you what the answer is, to a world of coaching, where I help you become a better learner. I think that encapsulates the shift that we have to make. And unfortunately, in L&D, we're all trained in the former. We're trained in how a very paternalistic mindset that says, I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to create a learning sequence for you. I'm going to create a path or a course of study for you. I'm going to solve and organize the world's information on your behalf, Mr. or Ms. Learner. Wrong, 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 wrong. Will not sustain, doesn't work in the new world. So we need to get out of the way. We need to facilitate people's abilities to learn from each other, do what they naturally do. So I think of it in a nutshell as the shift from doing training to facilitating and enabling learning. Radically different job.
All right. Love that. So just a quick time check. I think that's a great one to kind of end on. I don't think we got the full 30, did we, Chris?
Oh, I think we did.
Okay, great. So what about one last question for you in the audience and quick kind of lightning round from our panelists, borrowing a closing question that I learned from my colleagues at Boeing who learned it from the Ready. Closing question. What did you notice from the last hours of experience? What did you learn? Panelists, what did you notice? What did you learn from our little experiment? Janice.
First of all, I've learned that Rodney is a kindred spirit. She's unapologetic. She speaks directly, and she is a positive disruptor. Love her, want to do work with you, and that I really like this format. So those are the things that I learned or observed.
I'll roll next. Back at you, Janice. I feel like I've found one of my people here today, which is awesome. Yeah, I noticed that, the folks that were in the chat and paying questions, just like very high level questions, like very nuanced, very sophisticated questions that really made me stop and think. I have a page of notes from listening to my panelist friends speak. So just appreciate the engagement and that this felt like a real conversation.
Michael.
Yeah, I think for me, one point that really resonated was Janice's point about how like we can't disconnect somebody's skills or what somebody learns from their identity, right? And we need to be really, really conscious of that when asking people to reskill or upskill. That really stuck with me.
And last but not least, Dr. Tall.
I think, is that me?
Yes.
Thank you, fellow panelists. I learned a lot. It's very hard to listen. That's one of the things that I don't like about panel discussions is it's hard to listen really well because there's so many different voices and there's so much going on. But I heard a lot of really interesting points of view today from you and from the very incisive questions of the audience. And I think what I learned more than anything else is to relax about there not being rules. I was very nervous about this because we hadn't kind of sketched it all out and agreed who was going to talk about what. And I thought it was much more interesting for all that getting out of the way with all that stuff. So super nice to meet you all. Have a great Learnapalooza today. And thanks, Erin, for your leadership on this.
Thank you all. You know, I'm huge fans of you. Check out the podcast, Brave New Work with Rodney and Erin Dickman. Learning is the New Working with Chris Pirie. Check out what Degreed is doing and disrupting in their space. Check out what Michael is doing and disrupting in the Arist space. And he and his team have an exhibitor booth here this day. So thank you all for the amazing questions, getting some positive feedback on this as a format, people feeling energized. I'm feeling a little emotional, so I'm going to go off camera and just say I love y'all. Have a great Friday and stay healthy, safe, and sane.